The Alpha King's car smelled like leather and death, and Jessica couldn't tell which one was going to kill her first. She was pressed against the door, as far from him as the back seat would allow, her bound wrists trembling in her lap. Outside, the Blackwood Pack village was disappearing into the rain and darkness, growing smaller through the rear window like a nightmare she couldn't wake from. Inside, the man beside her was breathing too hard, his knuckles white where they gripped his own knees, his entire body vibrating with a violence he was barely holding back. King Raymond hadn't spoken since he'd thrown her into the car. Hadn't explained why Alpha Vance's blood was still dripping from his rings. Hadn't told her why his eyes kept flashing that unnatural, feral gold every time he looked at her. All she knew was that she was supposed to be dead right now. The culling had been her execution. The rain-soaked village circle, the pack closing in with teeth bared, Alpha Vance dragging her forward by her hair while he announced her crimes, wolfless, useless, a stain on their bloodline. She'd accepted it, prayed for it to be quick. And then the king had arrived, and everything had gone wrong in a way that made no sense, in a way that turned her execution into something far more terrifying. Because the Alpha King, the man who slaughtered entire packs for sport, who was supposed to be bored by weakness, had caught her scent. And he'd lost his mind. Jessica flinched as Raymond shifted beside her, his massive frame taking up too much space, his presence crushing the air from the car. She could see him in her peripheral vision, his jaw clenched so tight she thought his teeth might crack, his chest heaving like he'd just run for miles. His hands flexed and unflexed, and she watched his claws extend and retract, like his body couldn't decide whether to shift or tear something apart. She'd seen what those hands could do. Seen him backhand Alpha Vance with enough force to send a full-grown alpha flying across the circle, his face caving in on impact. Seen him drop to his knees in the mud in front of her, growling at anyone who dared to move, his eyes glowing so bright they looked like twin suns burning through the storm. He looked at her like she was the only thing in the world that mattered. Like she was precious. Sacred. And that was the most terrifying thing of all, because men like him didn't protect things. They consumed them. The car hit a pothole and Jessica lurched forward, her shoulder brushing against his arm. The contact lasted less than a second, but Raymond's reaction was instant and violent. A growl tore from his chest, so deep and primal it rattled the windows, and his hand shot out to steady her, gripping her upper arm with a gentleness that contradicted the madness in his eyes. "Don't," he bit out, his voice barely human, distorted by the wolf trying to claw its way through his throat. "Don't pull away from me." But she did. She wrenched her arm free and plastered herself against the door again, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. His nostrils flared, and for a moment she thought he was going to grab her again, drag her across the seat and pin her beneath him. But instead, he squeezed his eyes shut and pressed his fists against his temples, his whole body shaking with the effort of controlling whatever was happening inside him. "I'm not going to hurt you," he ground out, each word sounding like it cost him something vital. "I need you to understand that." "I would never," he broke off with another growl, his head snapping toward the window as if he couldn't bear to look at her. "My wolf, he's not. I can't." Jessica didn't understand. Couldn't understand. She was wolfless. She'd never felt the instincts that drove the pack, never experienced the bond that connected wolves to their kind. All she knew was what she could see, a predator fighting himself and losing. The driver, a stone-faced man with military posture, hadn't said a word since they'd left the village. Didn't react when his king growled. Didn't flinch when Raymond's claws shredded the leather armrest between them. Just kept driving through the storm, his eyes on the road, like ferrying a barely controlled monster, and his terrified prisoner was a normal Tuesday night. Maybe for him it was. "Please," Jessica whispered, hating how small her voice sounded, how broken. "Please, just make it quick. Whatever you're going to do, just quick." Raymond's head whipped toward her, and the look in his eyes made her breath catch. It wasn't anger. It was anguish. Raw and devastating and completely out of place on the face of a man rumored to be heartless. You think I'm going to kill you? You killed Alpha Vance. Her voice cracked. You destroyed him for pushing me. Why would you do that unless? Because he touched you. The words exploded from Raymond like a confession he'd been holding back too long. Because he hurt you, because his scent was all over you, because every instinct in my body was screaming to rip his throat out for daring to put his hands on Watts. He cut himself off, his jaw working, his hands clenching into fists again. You don't understand. You can't feel it. But I can. God help me, I can feel everything. Jessica stared at him, her mind racing, trying to piece together what he was saying through the filter of her fear. His scent was on her. His instincts were screaming. He couldn't control his wolf. And then a memory surfaced, something she'd overheard once in the pack house, two older females whispering about mate bonds and fated pairs. About how an alpha's wolf could go feral when it found its mate, how the need to claim and protect could override all reason, all humanity. No, that wasn't possible. I don't have a wolf, she said, the words tumbling out in a desperate rush. I can't be anyone's mate. There's nothing for you to bond with. You've made a mistake. There's no mistake. His voice was quieter now, but somehow more intense, more certain. I caught your scent. Winter frost and wild honeysuckle. It hit me like lightning, like every prayer I'd never said being answered all at once. My wolf knew before I did. You're mine, Jessica. You're my mate. The way he said her name, like a vow, like a claim, sent ice down her spine. I don't feel anything, she whispered, pressing herself harder against the door. I don't feel a bond. I don't feel anything except afraid. Something cracked in his expression, a fissure of pain splitting through the feral intensity. He looked away, his hand coming up to cover his mouth, his shoulders curling inward like he was trying to protect himself from her words. I know, he said, so quiet she almost didn't hear it over the rain hammering the roof. I know you're afraid of me. I can smell it. And it's killing me, because the one thing my wolf wants more than anything is to make you feel safe, and I'm the thing you need safety from. The car turned onto a smoother road, the village now miles behind them. Ahead, through the rain-streaked windshield, Jessica could see lights in the distance. A city, maybe? Or a compound. Somewhere he was taking her, somewhere she had no choice but to go. She thought about jumping from the moving car. Thought about screaming, fighting, doing anything except sitting here drowning in the tension that filled the space between them. But she'd seen what he could do. Seen the speed, the strength, the absolute brutal efficiency with which he'd dismantled Alpha Vance. If she ran, he would catch her. And his wolf, that feral thing he was barely keeping caged, might not let him be gentle about it. So she sat, trapped, watching him fight himself in the darkness beside her. Where are you taking me? She finally asked. Home, he said. My territory. You'll be safe there. Safe from what? From everyone who will come for you once they realize what you are to me. He turned to look at her then, and the gold in his eyes had dimmed to something almost human, almost vulnerable. The moment I claimed you in front of the Blackwood pack, I painted a target on your back. Every enemy I have, every rival pack, every wolf who wants to see me brought down, they'll see you as a weakness they can exploit. So I need to get you somewhere fortified. Somewhere I can protect you while I figure out how to make you stop looking at me like I'm a monster. You're a monster, she said before she could stop herself. Everyone knows what you've done. The packs you've destroyed, the wolves you've killed. For good reason. His voice hardened. Every pack I've eliminated was corrupt, abusive, trafficking in things that violated our most sacred laws. I don't slaughter the innocent, Jessica. I eliminate threats. There's a difference. And what am I? She asked, her voice breaking. What does that make me? Your mate that you claimed without asking, that you took from her pack, that you've locked in a car with you while you fight not to lose control. The silence that followed was heavy enough to suffocate. "You're the only good thing that's ever happened to me," he said finally. "And I'm terrified I'm going to ruin you." The rawness in his admission caught her off guard, made something in her chest twist unexpectedly. She looked at him, really looked at him, and saw past the predator, past the king, to something underneath. Something damaged and desperate, and trying so hard not to break. But that didn't change what he was. What he'd done. The fact that she hadn't chosen any of this. The car began to slow, turning through massive iron gates that opened automatically as they approached. Beyond them, a sprawling estate materialized through the rain, all stone and steel and defensive architecture. Guard towers. Walls. Wolves patrolling the perimeter with military precision. This was his kingdom. His fortress. Her cage. As the car pulled to a stop in front of the main building, Raymond reached for the door handle, then paused. Looked back at her with an expression that might have been hope or might have been resignation. "I'm going to do everything in my power to earn your trust," he said. "I know I don't deserve it. I know I've frightened you. But I'm asking you to give me a chance to prove I'm not what you think I am." Jessica stared at him, her bound wrists aching, her body exhausted, her mind spinning with too many questions and not enough answers. "And if I say no," she whispered. The pain that flashed across his face was answer enough. "Then I'll spend the rest of my life trying anyway," he said. "Because you're mine, Jessica. And I protect what's mine. Even if that means protecting you from me." He opened the door and stepped out into the rain, leaving her alone in the car with her racing heart and the terrible, confusing realization that the most dangerous man in the world was somehow more afraid of losing her than she was of him. And she had no idea what to do with that. If you want to know whether she'll ever stop running from the man fate chose for her, subscribe to Cindy's Wolfheart stories. Because sometimes the most dangerous love is the one you never saw coming. 2 guards appeared at Jessica's door before she could decide whether to move. They wore black tactical gear, their faces impassive, their movements efficient and controlled. One of them opened her door while the other held an umbrella, as if the rain was the biggest threat she faced right now. As if she wasn't being delivered into captivity by the king himself. Raymond stood 10 feet away under the covered entrance, watching her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. He'd regained some of his composure during the short walk from the car, his shoulders squared, his expression locked into something more controlled. But his eyes still held that gold shimmer, and his hands were still clenched at his sides like he didn't trust what they might do if he relaxed them. "Help her out," he said to the guards, his voice tight. Carefully. The guard closest to her extended a hand, his expression neutral. Jessica looked at it like it was a trap. Maybe it was. Maybe everything about this place was designed to make her feel like she had choices when really she had none. But her legs were cramping from being pressed against the car door, and her wrists were still bound, and the rain was starting to soak through her thin dress. So she took the guard's hand and let him help her out, her bare feet touching wet stone that was somehow warmer than the mud she'd been kneeling in an hour ago. The moment she was upright, Raymond moved. Not toward her, but closer, closing the distance by half. His body angled like he wanted to reach for her, but was forcing himself not to. The restraint in every line of him was palpable, a physical thing she could almost see vibrating in the air between them. "Inside," he said, gesturing toward the entrance. Not a command, despite his tone. More like a plea wrapped in authority. "You're soaked. You need dry clothes. Food. Medical attention." "I need you to untie me," Jessica interrupted, lifting her bound wrists between them. The rope had rubbed her skin raw, thin lines of blood seeping through where the fibers had cut deepest. "Please." The word cost her. She hated begging. Had done enough of it in her life to last several lifetimes. But she needed her hands free. Needed to at least pretend she had some autonomy here, even if they both knew the truth. Raymond's gaze dropped to her wrists and something feral flashed across his face. "Who tied you?" His voice had gone quiet. "Dangerous. Alpha Vance. Before the culling. Before you." He's already dead. Raymond closed the remaining distance between them in 2 strides, and Jessica's breath caught as he reached for her hands. His touch was so gentle it contradicted everything she knew about him, his fingers barely grazing her skin as he examined the damage. But if he wasn't, I'd kill him again for this. His claws extended, razor-sharp, and Jessica flinched despite herself. But he didn't hurt her. Just sliced through the rope in one clean motion, freeing her wrists. The relief was immediate and overwhelming, blood rushing back into her fingers with a painful tingling that made her gasp. "You're bleeding," Raymond murmured, still holding her hands, his thumbs hovering over the raw marks like he wanted to touch them, but didn't dare. "I have a healer. She'll take care of this. She'll take care of everything." "I don't need." Jessica started to pull away, but his grip tightened fractionally. "Not enough to hurt. Just enough to keep her there." "You're injured because of me," he said, his eyes meeting hers, and there was something devastating in them. Guilt. Self-loathing. Because I didn't get there sooner. Because I let them hurt you before I understood what you were. So yes, Jessica, you do need a healer. And you're going to let her help you, because I can't." His voice cracked. "I can't stand your pain. I can feel it like it's my own, and it's shredding me from the inside out." She stared at him, this terrifying king who had just admitted to feeling her pain and didn't know what to say. Didn't know how to reconcile the monster everyone said he was with the man standing in front of her, holding her damaged wrists like they were made of glass. "I don't understand you," she whispered. "I know." He released her hands slowly, reluctantly, his fingers trailing across her skin before falling away. "But you will. I promise you that. Come inside. Please." The please did something to her. Made her remember that despite everything, the violence, the claiming, the forced extraction from her pack, he hadn't actually forced her to do anything yet. Hadn't dragged her from the car. Hadn't commanded her in a way that left no room for refusal. He was asking. And somehow, that was more terrifying than if he'd just taken. Jessica moved toward the entrance, acutely aware of him behind her, matching his pace to hers, maintaining a distance that felt calculated. Close enough to catch her if she fell. Far enough not to crowd her. The interior of his estate was nothing like she'd expected. She'd imagined something cold and militaristic, all stone and steel and weapons on walls. Instead, she stepped into warmth. Soft lighting. Rich wood floors and textured walls and furniture that looked lived in rather than decorative. It felt like a home, not a fortress. "My quarters are on the 3rd floor, Raymond said from behind her. "But I've had rooms prepared for you on the 2nd. Your own space. Your own bathroom. A sitting room. Whatever you need." "The doors lock from the inside," he added, and she heard the weight behind those words. "I won't come in unless you invite me." Jessica turned to look at him, searching his face for the lie, for the trap. But all she saw was sincerity. And exhaustion. He looked like he'd aged years in the past hour, the lines around his eyes deeper, his jaw tight with tension. "Why?" she asked. "If I'm your mate, if you feel this bond so strongly, why would you give me locked doors? Why wouldn't you just?" "Because you're afraid of me," he said simply. "And I won't compound that fear by taking your choices away. The mate bond might be driving my wolf insane, but I'm still a man, Jessica. Still capable of understanding that what I want doesn't matter if it comes at the cost of your peace of mind." A woman appeared from a side hallway, older, with silver-streaked hair and kind eyes. She wore simple clothes, no formal uniform, and she smiled at Jessica like they were old friends. "This is Marin," Raymond said. "My healer and the closest thing I have to family. She'll help you get settled. Show you to your rooms. Tend to your injuries." He paused, his gaze lingering on Jessica's face like he was memorizing it. "I need to debrief with my security team. Make sure the Blackwood Pack understands the consequences if they try to follow you here. But I'll be nearby if you need me." "I won't need you," Jessica said, the words automatic, defensive. Pain flickered across his expression, there and gone so quickly she might have imagined it. Probably not, he agreed quietly. But I'll be nearby anyway. He turned and walked away, his shoulders rigid, his hands shoved into his pockets like he was restraining them physically. She watched him disappear down a corridor, flanked by guards who'd materialized from nowhere, and felt a confusing mix of relief and something else. Something that might have been disappointment, though she refused to examine why. "Come, dear," Marin said gently, touching Jessica's elbow. "Let's get you warm and dry. You look like you've been through hell tonight." "I have been," Jessica murmured, following the older woman toward a staircase. "And I'm not sure I've left it yet." Marin glanced back at her with knowing eyes. "Our king isn't hell, child. He's just a man who's been alone too long, who's forgotten how to be anything other than a weapon. You'll see. Give him time." "I don't have a choice but to give him time," Jessica said bitterly. "I'm trapped here." "Are you?" Marin stopped on the stairs, turning to face her fully. "Has he threatened you? Locked you in? Told you that you can't leave?" Jessica opened her mouth, then closed it. Because no, he hadn't done any of those things. Had actually promised her locked doors that she controlled. Had given her space when his wolf was clearly demanding he do the opposite. "He said people would come for me," she said instead. "That I'd be in danger because of what I am to him." "That's not a lie," Marin said seriously. "Raymond has enemies. Powerful ones. And they would absolutely use you against him if they knew you existed. So yes, you're safer here than anywhere else in the world right now. But safe and trapped aren't the same thing, dear. One is about protection. The other is about control. Try to figure out which one you're experiencing before you make judgments about the man." She continued up the stairs, leaving Jessica to follow or not. It wasn't really a choice, though. Where else would she go? Back out into the rain, past the guards and walls, back toward a pack that had tried to execute her? At least here, she had a healer who spoke to her kindly. Rooms with locks she controlled. A king who claimed to feel her pain. At least here, she might survive long enough to understand what was happening to her. The second floor was quieter than the first, more intimate. Marin led her down a hallway lined with paintings, landscapes mostly, forests and mountains and moonlit skies, and stopped at a door near the end. "These are yours," she said, pushing it open. The rooms beyond were beautiful. A large bedroom with a four-poster bed dressed in soft linens. A sitting area with a fireplace already crackling with warmth. Floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the estate grounds. And, through another door, a bathroom with a tub large enough to drown in. "He had all this prepared?" Jessica asked, her voice small. "He's been preparing these rooms for years," Marin said softly. "Since he first became king. He always hoped he'd find his mate someday. Wanted to have a place worthy of her when he did." She moved to a wardrobe and opened it, revealing clothes in various sizes. "These should fit. Choose whatever you like. I'll tend to your wrists while you change." Jessica stood in the center of the room, overwhelmed by the care evident in every detail. By the implications of a man who'd been waiting years for someone he didn't know existed. Who'd built a home within his fortress just for her. "He really believes I'm his mate," she whispered. "He doesn't believe it, dear. He knows it." Marin pulled out a simple dress and laid it on the bed. "The question is whether you'll ever be able to feel what he feels. Whether the bond will find a way to reach you despite your lack of a wolf. And if it doesn't?" Marin's expression turned sad. "Then you'll have to decide if you can love a man who's fated to love you without fate's help. And he'll have to learn to live with a bond that only goes one direction." She gestured to the bathroom. "Go on. Warm up. I'll wait here." Jessica moved mechanically toward the bathroom, shedding her ruined dress, stepping into water hot enough to sting. She sank down until it covered her shoulders, until the heat seeped into her bones, and only then did she let herself break. Silent tears mixed with bath water as she processed everything that had happened. The culling. Vance's death. Raymond's feral claiming. The drive here, trapped with a man fighting his own nature. The confession that she was his mate, spoken like a death sentence and a blessing in the same breath. She'd gone from having nothing to being everything to someone in the space of an hour. And she had no idea if that made her more free or more trapped than she'd ever been. Through the door, she could hear Marin humming softly, a melody that sounded old and comforting. Somewhere in the building, Raymond was debriefing his guards, threatening her old pack, trying to secure her safety while fighting the instinct to come to her. She thought about the pain in his eyes when she'd said she wouldn't need him, about the way his hands had trembled when he'd freed her wrists, about the promise that he'd spend his life earning her trust even if she never gave it. He was a monster to everyone else. That's what he'd told her without words, through his actions and his reputation. But to her, he was trying so desperately to be something different. And Jessica, who'd spent her whole life being treated as less than nothing, had no idea how to handle being treated as everything. The water grew cold around her before she finally stood. Dried off. Put on the soft dress Marin had chosen. Emerged to let the healer wrap her wrists in bandages infused with something that smelled like herbs and made the pain fade to a distant ache. "He'll want to check on you," Marin said as she finished. "Probably within the hour. His wolf won't let him stay away much longer than that. You don't have to see him if you don't want to. I can turn him away." Jessica looked at the door with its lock she controlled, at the windows that showed a world she could no longer safely enter, at the beautiful prison built by a man who claimed to want her choice even as fate stole it from her. "Let him come," she heard herself say. "I need answers. And he's the only one who can give them to me." Marin smiled, sad and knowing. He'll be relieved. And terrified. Try to remember that under all that power, he's just a man who's been waiting his whole life for you. That kind of wanting makes fools of even the strongest wolves. She left, closing the door softly behind her, and Jessica was alone with her thoughts and the growing certainty that nothing about her life would ever be simple again. Somewhere in this building, an Alpha King was counting down the minutes until he could see her again, fighting his nature with every second that passed. And despite everything, the fear, the confusion, the loss of her old life, Jessica found herself counting too. Wondering what he'd look like when he wasn't falling apart. What he'd say when he wasn't desperate. Who he really was beneath the reputation and the violence and the terrible, consuming bond that only he could feel. She'd know soon enough. The hour was already half gone. Jessica stood at the window, watching moonlight break through the thinning clouds, and let the memories come. They'd always called her broken. Defective. A mistake that the moon goddess had played on the Blackwood pack. Her mother had died bringing her into the world, bleeding out in the pack house while the midwives whispered about curses and bad omens. Her father had looked at her once, seen that she carried no wolf scent, no shimmer of the beast in her newborn eyes, and walked away. Just walked away and never came back. The pack had kept her because werewolf law demanded it. You didn't abandon your young, even the broken ones. But law and kindness were different things, and the Blackwood pack had no kindness to spare for a child who would never shift, never hunt, never contribute to the strength of the pack. She learned early that silence was survival. That making herself small meant fewer beatings. That if she finished her chores before dawn and disappeared into the forest until dusk, sometimes they'd forget she existed long enough for her to catch her breath. The forest had been her only refuge. The trees didn't care that she couldn't shift. The streams didn't mock her for being wolfless. In the quiet spaces between the pack's territory and the wild lands beyond, she'd taught herself to move like a ghost, to read tracks and weather signs, to survive on roots and berries when they forgot to feed her. She'd been 12 when she'd first tried to run away. Made it 3 days into the unclaimed territories before a rogue pack had found her, dragged her back to the Blackwood borders, and dumped her at Alpha Vance's feet like trash they'd found littering their land. Vance had beaten her unconscious in front of the entire pack. A lesson, he'd said, about knowing your place. About understanding that even the broken belonged to someone, and that someone decided whether you lived or died. She'd never tried to run again after that. Instead, She learned to endure. To take the insults and the isolation and the bone-deep loneliness and bury it somewhere so deep that most days she could pretend it didn't exist. She learned to be grateful for the scraps they threw her, for the basement room with no windows where they kept her, for the privilege of being allowed to live even though her existence offended them. And she learned to hate herself, to believe what they told her, that she was worthless, that she was a burden, that the world would be better off if she'd never been born. The culling had almost been a relief, a formal end to a life that had never really begun. She'd knelt in that muddy circle and felt something like peace, knowing it would finally be over. No more pretending, no more surviving, just silence and darkness and an absence of pain. But then he'd come. Jessica pressed her forehead against the cool glass, her reflection staring back at her with hollow eyes. She looked different here. Cleaner, obviously. The dress Marin had given her actually fit, hugged her body in a way that made her look almost normal. Almost like someone who deserved to wear nice things. But it was more than that. Something in her face had changed. A sharpness in her eyes that hadn't been there before. A set-to jaw that looked less like resignation and more like defiance. Maybe almost dying did that to a person. Made them realize they wanted to live after all. Or maybe it was him. Raymond. The way he looked at her like she was sacred. Like her life had value. Like her existence mattered in a way that had nothing to do with usefulness or strength or any of the measures the Blackwood Pack had used to weigh her worth. She didn't understand it. Didn't trust it. But she couldn't deny that something had shifted inside her the moment he'd caught her scent and lost control. For the first time in her life, someone had fought for her. Had been willing to kill for her. And even though it terrified her, even though she didn't know what it meant or what he wanted from her, there was a part of her, small and damaged and desperately hungry, that wanted to understand why. Why her? What did he see that no one else had ever seen? What made her scent so intoxicating to him that his wolf had overridden centuries of alpha control? What made her broken, wolfless, worthless her worthy of a bond that legends were written about? A soft knock at the door made her jump. Her heart kicked into overdrive, her breath catching in her throat. Jessica. Raymond's voice, muffled through the wood. Careful. Controlled. May I come in? She looked at the lock. At her fingers trembling near the handle. At the choice he'd promised her. Yes, she said, and was surprised by how steady her voice sounded. The door opened slowly, like he was afraid of startling her. Raymond stepped inside and stopped just past the threshold, his hands visible at his sides, his posture deliberately non-threatening. He'd changed clothes, traded the blood-spattered shirt for a simple black Henley that somehow made him look less like a king and more like a man. His hair was damp, like he'd showered, and the gold had faded from his eyes, leaving them a deep, warm brown that might have been kind under different circumstances. You look warmer, he said, his gaze traveling over her carefully, cataloging the bandages on her wrists, the dress, the damp ends of her hair. Did Marin take care of you? Yes. Jessica stayed by the window, maintaining distance. She was kind. She's good at that. Being kind. He shifted his weight, looking uncomfortable in a way that seemed foreign on him. I'm not. Good at it, I mean. I've spent too many years being other things. Harder things. But I'm trying. I need you to know that I'm trying. Why? The question burst out of her before she could stop it. Why does it matter so much? You don't know me. I don't know you. This bond you feel, it's just biology, isn't it? Instinct. It doesn't mean anything real. Something painful flashed across his face. It means everything real, he said quietly. But I understand why you can't feel that. Why it must seem insane from your perspective. He took a slow breath, like he was gathering courage. Can I sit? I promise I'll stay by the door. I need to tell you some things, and I'd rather not do it while you're looking at me like I might attack at any moment. Jessica nodded, watching him sink down to sit with his back against the wall beside the door, his long legs stretched out in front of him. The position made him look less intimidating, almost vulnerable. She stayed where she was, leaning against the window frame, but some of the tension in her shoulders eased. I became king when I was 19, Raymond started, his eyes on the floor between them. Not because I wanted power, but because the previous king, my uncle, was corrupt. He was torturing pack members who challenged him, trafficking females to other packs for profit, using his position to brutalize anyone weaker than him. My father tried to stop him and was executed for treason. My mother was killed trying to protect me from the same fate. Jessica's breath caught. She'd heard he was ruthless, but she'd never heard he'd come from tragedy. I challenged him in single combat, Raymond continued. Killed him in front of the entire pack. Took his title and his territory and spent the next decade hunting down every alpha who operated the way he did. That's why I have a reputation for destroying packs. Because I don't tolerate abuse. I don't tolerate corruption. And I sure as hell don't tolerate wolves who use their strength to crush those who can't fight back. He finally looked up at her, and the weight in his eyes made her chest tighten. I've been alone since I was 19, he said. Surrounded by people, but alone in every way that matters. I couldn't afford to be soft. Couldn't afford weakness or distraction or anything that might make me less than the weapon I needed to be to keep my people safe. So I buried everything human about myself and became the monster everyone needed me to be. And then you caught my scent, Jessica whispered. And then I caught your scent, he agreed. And every wall I'd built, every piece of humanity I'd locked away, every emotion I'd taught myself not to feel, it all came crashing down at once. My wolf recognized you. Knew you. And suddenly nothing else mattered. Not my reputation, not my control, not the careful balance I'd maintained for years. Just you. Keeping you safe. Keeping you close. Making sure no one ever hurt you again. He rubbed a hand over his face, exhaustion evident in every line of his body. I know it's not fair, he said. I know you didn't choose this. That you can't feel what I feel. That from your perspective, I'm just a stranger who went insane and kidnapped you from your execution. But Jessica, you have to understand, when I caught your scent, when my wolf recognized you as mine, it wasn't just about wanting you. It was about finally having a reason to be more than a weapon. About having someone worth being human for. Tears pricked at Jessica's eyes unexpectedly. She blinked them back, refusing to let them fall. I don't know how to be that for you, she said, her voice breaking. I don't know how to be worth anything to anyone. I've spent my entire life being told I'm broken. That I'm a mistake. You're not broken. He said it with such fierce certainty that it stopped her mid-sentence. You're not a mistake. And whoever told you those things was lying. Do you know what I smelled when I caught your scent? What my wolf recognized. She shook her head, not trusting her voice. Power, he said. Raw, untapped, absolutely terrifying power. It's wrapped around you like a second skin, dormant, but definitely there. You might not have a wolf, Jessica, but you have something. Something the Blackwood Pack either couldn't sense or was too stupid to recognize. Something that called to my wolf like lightning calling to a storm. Jessica's heart was pounding. That's impossible. I've never felt anything. Never been able to do anything that the others could do. Because you've been suppressed. Raymond leaned forward, his intensity focused entirely on her. Trauma can vary abilities. Especially if they manifest young and you're told they're wrong or dangerous. Your pack spent 18 years convincing you that you were worthless, and your mind believed them. Locked everything away to protect you from their rejection. But I can feel it in you. My wolf can sense it. And I think that's why the bond is so strong, because you're not just my mate. You're my equal. Maybe even my superior, if you ever figure out what you're capable of. You're wrong, she whispered, but there was no conviction in it. Because there had been moments. Times when she was alone in the forest, and the trees seemed to bend toward her. Nights when she'd been beaten so badly she should have died, but woke up the next morning with injuries that had healed impossibly fast for someone without a wolf. Instances where she'd known things she shouldn't have known, felt things she shouldn't have felt. She'd always told herself she was imagining it. That desperation was making her see patterns that didn't exist. But what if she hadn't been imagining it? What if Raymond was right? "I can help you," he said gently. "We have resources here. Healers who understand abilities that fall outside normal wolf parameters. Teachers who can help you access whatever's dormant inside you. But only if you want that. Only if you choose to stay and explore what you might be instead of running from it." "And if I choose to leave?" she asked, testing him. Pain flickered across his expression, but he didn't hesitate. "Then I'll make sure you have somewhere safe to go. Somewhere my enemies can't find you. I'll protect you from a distance, whether you want me to or not, because that's what the bond demands. But I won't force you to stay, Jessica. I won't become another alpha who takes your choices away." She studied him, this dangerous king sitting on her floor, offering her freedom even though it clearly cost him everything to do so. And she realized that she believed him. That despite his reputation, despite the violence she'd witnessed, despite everything that terrified her about him, she believed that he would let her go if she asked. Which made the question simpler. Did she want to go? Back to what? A pack that had tried to kill her? A world where she had no resources, no protection, no way to survive on her own? Where every wolf who caught wind of her connection to Raymond would see her as either a target or a prize? Or did she want to stay? To understand what he'd sensed in her? To figure out if she really was broken or if she'd just been convinced she was by people who'd needed her to be small so they could feel big. "I need time," she said finally. "I need space to process everything that's happened. To figure out who I am without a pack telling me. To decide what I want instead of just reacting to what's been done to me." "You can have all the time you need," Raymond said immediately. "All the space. I meant what I said about the locked doors. About not forcing anything. You're in control here, Jessica. Whatever you decide, I'll respect it." He stood slowly, carefully, like he was afraid sudden movements might spook her. Moved toward the door, then paused with his hand on the handle. "For what it's worth," he said softly, not looking at her, "I'm sorry. For how you've been treated. For what you've endured. For the fact that I found you too late to stop any of it. I can't change your past, but I swear to you on everything I am that no one will ever make you feel worthless again. Not while I'm alive to prevent it." He left before she could respond, the door clicking shut behind him with a finality that echoed in the sudden silence. Jessica stood at the window for a long time after, watching the moon rise higher, feeling the weight of his words settling into her bones. Power. Dormant abilities. A reason to be more than a weapon. She looked down at her bandaged wrists, at the scars that covered her arms from years of abuse, at the body she'd spent her whole life being ashamed of because it didn't transform like it was supposed to. What if he was right? What if there was something inside her that the Blackwood Pack had been too blind or too cruel to see? What if she wasn't broken at all, but just buried? The thought was terrifying. But it was also the first spark of hope she'd felt in years. And as she climbed into the soft bed, as she pulled the covers up to her chin and let exhaustion finally claim her, Jessica made a decision. She would stay. For now. Not because of the bond he felt, or because she had nowhere else to go, or because she was afraid of his enemies. But because for the first time in her life, someone had looked at her and seen possibility instead of failure. And she needed to know if he was right. Needed to know if the girl who'd spent 18 years being told she was nothing might actually be something extraordinary. Even if that something terrified her. Even if it meant trusting the monster who'd saved her. Even if it meant risking the fragile, broken pieces of herself that she'd spent so long protecting. She closed her eyes and let sleep take her, dreaming of forests that bent to her will and a king with kind eyes who promised her the world if she'd only be brave enough to reach for it. Jessica woke to sunlight streaming through windows she'd forgotten to curtain and the smell of food that made her stomach clench with hunger. A tray sat on the table near her bed, fresh bread, fruit, cheese, tea still steaming in a delicate cup. Someone had brought it while she slept, Quiet enough not to wake her, thoughtful enough to leave it within reach. She ate slowly, savoring every bite in a way she'd never been able to before. In the Blackwood pack, meals had been competitions. You ate fast or you didn't eat at all. Here, alone in her room with locked doors and sunlight warming her skin, she could take her time. Could actually taste the food instead of just consuming it for survival. It felt like luxury. It felt like safety. It felt dangerous to get used to. A soft knock interrupted her third piece of bread. "It's Marin, dear. May I come in?" Jessica brushed crumbs from her lap and opened the door. The healer stood there with fresh bandages and a warm smile, but there was something else in her expression. Purpose, maybe. Or anticipation. "How are your wrists this morning?" Marin asked, stepping inside and closing the door behind her. "Better. Whatever you put on them worked." Jessica held out her arms, watching as Marin unwrapped the old bandages. The wounds that should have taken days to heal had already scabbed over, the swelling gone, the pain reduced to a dull ache. Marin made a small sound of approval. "Fast healing. Even without a wolf. Interesting. Is it?" Jessica pulled her arms back, suddenly self-conscious. "Very." Marin began gathering the soiled bandages, but her eyes stayed on Jessica's face. "Our king asked me to extend an invitation. He'd like to show you something today. Something important. He said to tell you that it's not a command, and that you can refuse without consequence, but that he thinks you need to see it." Jessica's stomach tightened. "See what?" "The Grove of Elders. It's a sacred place on the northern edge of our territory. Very old. Very aware, if you understand my meaning." Marin's expression turned serious. "Not many wolves are called there. But Raymond believes you should visit. That the Grove might have answers to questions you don't even know you're asking yet. And if I say no, then he'll respect that. He's waiting in the garden below your window, has been since dawn, hoping you'll agree to go with him. But he won't force it." Marin moved toward the wardrobe and pulled out clothes more practical than the dress Jessica wore: sturdy pants, a soft shirt, boots that looked well made. "I'd recommend going, though. Not because of him, but because of you. The Grove has a way of revealing truths that need revealing. And I suspect you're carrying truths you've been blind to your entire life." Jessica looked at the clothes, then at the window. She moved to it and looked down into the garden below. Raymond sat on a stone bench, his posture tense, his hands clasped between his knees. He looked like he hadn't slept. Like he'd spent the entire night wrestling with something that had no easy answer. As if sensing her gaze, he looked up. Their eyes met across the distance, and even from here she could see the hope in his expression. The barely restrained need to see her, to be near her, warring with his promise to give her space. He didn't wave, didn't smile, just held her gaze for a long moment, letting her see him, before looking away and giving her the choice without pressure. "I'll go," Jessica heard herself say. Marin's smile was knowing. "Good. I'll let him know. Take your time getting ready. The Grove isn't going anywhere, and neither is he." 30 minutes later, Jessica descended the stairs to find Raymond waiting in the foyer. He'd changed into clothes similar to hers, practical, functional, designed for walking through wilderness rather than commanding from a throne. He looked younger like this, less kingly, more like someone she might have passed in the forest and thought handsome if she'd been capable of noticing such things. "Thank you for agreeing to come," he said as she reached the bottom step. His voice was careful, respectful of the fragile peace between them. "I know trust is hard for you right now. This means more than you probably realize." Marin said the Grove might have answers. Jessica kept her tone neutral, not wanting to give too much away. "I need answers. So I'm coming for me, not for you." Something that might have been pain flickered across his face, but he nodded. "Fair enough. Whatever your reasons, I'm grateful for your company." They left through a side exit, avoiding the main areas of the estate where pack members might see them and complicate things with their stares and speculation. The morning was cool, the sky clear, the kind of day that made Jessica's chest ache with memories of mornings spent alone in the forest, feeling more at peace among the trees than she ever had among wolves. Raymond walked beside her but not too close, maintaining a respectful distance that must have cost him given what she now understood about the bond driving him. He pointed out landmarks as they went, the training grounds where his warriors practiced, the greenhouses where they grew medicinal herbs, the small cemetery where pack members who died in service were honored. "You care about them," Jessica observed, watching how his expression softened when he spoke about his people. "Your pack. They're my responsibility," he said simply. "Every one of them trusted me to lead them away from the corruption my uncle created. To build something better, something worthy of their loyalty. I owe them everything. I can't afford to fail them." "Is that why you've been alone?" "Because you can't afford distractions." He was quiet for a moment, his jaw working. "Yes," he finally admitted. "And because I was afraid of becoming like my uncle, of letting power corrupt me the way it corrupted him. Alone, I could control myself, could make sure I stayed the weapon my people needed rather than becoming the monster they feared. And now? Now I'm terrified," he said honestly, glancing at her. "Because you make me want things I'd given up on. Make me feel things I'd convinced myself I was better off without. And I don't know how to be both the king they need and the mate you deserve. Don't know if it's even possible to be both." The vulnerability in his admission caught her off guard. She'd expected arrogance, maybe. Possessiveness. Not this raw honesty about his fears. "I don't know what kind of mate I'd be even if I could feel the bond," Jessica said quietly. "I've never been taught how to be anything other than invisible. How to matter to someone. How to—" "You matter," Raymond interrupted, stopping in the middle of the path. "You mattered before I ever caught your scent, Jessica. Your pack was wrong about you. They were wrong about everything. And I need you to start believing that, because I can't stand watching you carry their lies around like they're truths." She stared at him, throat tight with emotions she didn't have names for. "You can't just say things like that and expect me to believe them. It doesn't work that way." "I know." He started walking again, leading her toward a tree line in the distance. "But I'm going to keep saying them anyway, until maybe one day you'll start believing them yourself." They walked in silence after that, Jessica processing his words, Raymond seeming content just to be near her even without conversation. The trees grew denser as they approached the northern border, older and more twisted, their branches creating a canopy that filtered the sunlight into something ethereal and strange. "The grove is just ahead," Raymond said, his voice dropping to something almost reverent. "It's sacred ground. The oldest wolves in our history are buried here, their spirits said to linger in the roots and stones. Some believe the first werewolves were created in this place, blessed by the moon goddess herself." "Do you believe that?" Jessica asked. "I believe there's power here," he said carefully. "Power that predates me, my pack, maybe even our species. I've felt it. Been called to it during moments when I needed guidance. It's never led me wrong." They emerged into a clearing unlike anything Jessica had ever seen. Ancient trees ringed the space, their trunks so massive it would take 10 people linking hands to encircle one. In the center stood a collection of standing stones, weathered by time but still imposing, arranged in patterns that suggested meaning she couldn't decipher. The air itself felt different here, thicker, charged with something that made her skin prickle and her breath catch. "What is this place?" she whispered, afraid to speak too loudly. "The Grove of Elders," Raymond said. "The heart of wolf magic. The place where our kind connects to something greater than pack politics and territorial disputes." He gestured toward the stones. "Go ahead. Touch them if you feel called to. The grove has been waiting for you." "How do you know it's been waiting for me?" He smiled sadly. "Because I asked it. Last night, after I left your room. I came here and asked the ancestors for guidance, for a way to help you understand what you are. And the grove answered. Told me to bring you at first light, that you needed to see something only it could show you." Jessica wanted to dismiss this as superstition, as the kind of mysticism her pack had used to justify their cruelty. But standing here, feeling the weight of ages pressing down on her, smelling something in the air that reminded her of thunderstorms and ancient rituals, she couldn't deny that this place was different. She walked toward the stones slowly, each step feeling heavier than the last, like the ground itself was testing her worthiness. Raymond stayed at the edge of the clearing, giving her space, but she could feel his attention on her, protective and intense. When she reached the nearest stone, she hesitated. Then, gathering courage she didn't know she possessed, she placed her palm flat against its surface. The world exploded into light. Visions slammed into her consciousness like physical blows. Images, sensations, memories that weren't hers, but felt true in a way that transcended logic. She saw wolves running through moonlit forests, their pelts silver and gleaming with power that had nothing to do with physical strength. Saw a woman standing in this very clearing, her arms raised to the sky, calling down lightning that didn't burn but blessed. Saw packs gathering from across the territories, bowing before a figure wreathed in light that might have been divine or might have been something else entirely. And then she saw herself. Or rather, someone who looked like her. Same dark hair, same slight build, same eyes that held too much knowledge and too much pain. But this version of her was different. Powerful. Standing in the center of a storm with hands outstretched, controlling forces that should have destroyed her. A voice filled her mind, ancient and feminine and absolutely certain, child of the forgotten line, daughter of the first flame. You were never meant to shift, because you were meant for something greater. The wolf is one form of our blessing. But you carry the original gift, the power that existed before the goddess chose to split it into lesser forms. You are what we were before we became what we are. You are the beginning, awakening at the end of an age that needs you desperately. Jessica tried to pull her hand away, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what she was hearing, but the stone held her fast. The voice continued, relentless and compassionate in equal measure. They called you broken because they could not understand what you were. They rejected you because your power made theirs seem small. But you are not broken, child. You are complete. Whole. The first of your kind in 1,000 years, born to remind us what we once were and what we might become again. Your mate knows. His wolf sensed the truth even if his human mind couldn't comprehend it. He was drawn to you not because of a simple bond, but because his beast recognized you as something sacred. Something worth protecting at any cost. He is your anchor, child. Your tether to this world. Without him, your power might consume you. With him, you might transform everything. The vision shifted, showing her possible futures. Herself standing beside Raymond, both of them wrapped in silver light, leading packs that had forgotten how to be united. Herself alone, power spiraling out of control, destroying everything she touched. Herself running, hiding, dying before she ever understood what she could have become. The choice is yours, the voice said. As it has always been. We do not force our children down predetermined paths. But know this, you were born for a reason. The world needs what you are, even if it doesn't understand it yet. And the man who loves you will stand beside you through whatever you choose, even if it costs him everything. The light faded. The vision stopped. Jessica stumbled backward, her hand finally releasing the stone, her legs barely able to hold her weight. She would have fallen if Raymond hadn't been there suddenly, catching her, lowering her gently to the ground while making sounds of concern that might have been words, but didn't register as language in her overwhelmed mind. Breathe, he was saying, his hands on her face, tilting her head up so she had no choice but to meet his eyes. Jessica, breathe. You're safe. I've got you. Just breathe. She dragged in air that tasted like ozone and possibility, her entire body shaking with the aftershocks of whatever had just happened. Raymond held her steady, his touch gentle but grounding, his presence the only solid thing in a world that had just revealed itself to be far stranger and more complex than she'd ever imagined. "What did you see?" he asked quietly, once her breathing had steadied. "Everything," she whispered. "I saw everything." They sat in the grove for hours, Jessica trying to find words for visions that defied explanation, Raymond listening with an intensity that made her feel heard in a way she'd never experienced. She told him about the woman who'd looked like her, about the voice that had called her child of the forgotten line, about futures branching in 1,000 directions depending on choices she hadn't yet made. "The original gift," Raymond murmured, his expression thoughtful. "I've heard whispers of it in the oldest texts. Power that existed before the goddess divided her blessing into the forms we know now, shifting, healing, the pack bonds. It was supposed to be a myth. A story the elders told to explain why some bloodlines carried abilities that fell outside normal parameters. The voice said I was the first in 1,000 years." Jessica wrapped her arms around herself, still feeling the echo of that ancient presence in her bones. "That I was never meant to shift because I was meant for something greater. But Raymond, I don't feel greater. I feel terrified. What if I can't control whatever this is? What if I hurt people?" "You won't." He said it with absolute conviction. "Not while I'm here to help you." The voice was right, I can feel it now, what my wolf sensed in you. It's not just attraction or the mate bond. It's recognition. My beast knows what you are even if I don't fully understand it yet. And everything in me is telling me that we're supposed to do this together. That I'm meant to be your anchor while you figure out what you're capable of. You do that." Jessica turned to look at him fully. "Risk everything to help me learn to use a power that might be dangerous? That might make your people fear you for protecting me." "Yes," he said simply, without hesitation. "You're my mate, Jessica. But more than that, you're important. What you represent, what you might become, it's bigger than pack politics or personal safety. If the Grove is right, if you really do carry this original gift, then you could change everything for our kind. Could remind us what we've forgotten, heal divisions that have existed for centuries. I'd be a fool and a coward to let that slip away because I was afraid of the cost." The conviction in his voice, the absolute certainty that she was worth the risk, made something crack open in Jessica's chest. For the first time since he'd caught her scent, she didn't flinch when he reached for her hand. Didn't pull away when his fingers laced with hers, warm and solid and strangely right. "I don't know how to do this," she admitted. "How to be what the Grove says I am. How to trust that you're not going to change your mind when things get difficult." "Then we'll figure it out together," Raymond said. "One day at a time. No expectations beyond learning and surviving and trying not to let fear make our decisions for us." Does that sound manageable? It didn't. It sounded impossible and terrifying and like everything she'd ever wanted without knowing she wanted it. But she nodded anyway, because the alternative running from this, from him, from the possibility that she might actually be something other than broken, felt like a worse kind of death than the culling ever had. "We should get back," Raymond said reluctantly. "My council is meeting this afternoon. They'll want updates on." He stopped, his entire body going rigid, his nostrils flaring. "We need to leave. Now." "What's wrong?" "Company." His voice had gone cold, dangerous. "Unfriendly company." Before Jessica could ask what he meant, wolves emerged from the tree line. Not Raymond's pack, she could tell by their scents, by the way Raymond immediately positioned himself between her and them, his body language screaming threat. There were 6 of them, all male, all radiating aggression and something else. Contempt, maybe. Or hunger. The largest one shifted, bones cracking and reforming until a man stood where the wolf had been. He was older than Raymond, scarred and powerfully built, with eyes that held no warmth whatsoever. "Alpha King," the man said, his tone mocking the title. "Interesting place for a morning walk. The Grove is supposed to be sacred ground. Neutral territory. Not a place for claiming mates you've stolen from their rightful packs." "Jessica wasn't stolen," Raymond said, his voice flat and deadly. She was saved from an illegal execution, and she came with me willingly. State your business, Tobias, or leave my territory before I make you leave. Tobias. Jessica searched her memory and found context. One of the neighboring pack alphas, known for his traditional views and his contempt for any wolf he considered weak. His territory bordered the Blackwood lands, and there had been whispers that he and Alpha Vance had been allies. Your territory? Tobias smiled, showing too many teeth. The grove belongs to no one, Raymond. It belongs to our kind. And I have as much right to be here as you do. His gaze shifted to Jessica, crawling over her in a way that made her skin prickle with revulsion. Especially when there are matters of pack law to discuss. Matters concerning the wolfless runt you've decided to parade around as if she were worthy of an alpha's attention. Watch your tongue, Raymond growled, and the temperature in the clearing seemed to drop 10 degrees. Or I'll cut it out and feed it to your own wolves. Violent as ever. Tobias didn't look intimidated. If anything, he looked pleased, like he'd gotten the reaction he wanted. The council has concerns, King. Concerns about your judgment. About the precedent you're setting by taking a defective wolf as your mate. About what it means for pack stability when the strongest alpha in the territories binds himself to someone who can't even shift. The council can take their concerns and... We're calling a gathering, Tobias interrupted. All the regional alphas. 3 days from now at the Convergence grounds. You'll be expected to attend and answer questions about your choice. About whether the bond you claim is legitimate or whether you've simply lost your mind and need to be removed from power before you cause more damage. Jessica's blood ran cold. They were challenging him. Not directly, not yet, but the threat was implicit. Choose the pack or choose her. Prove the bond or lose everything you've built. I don't answer to the council, Raymond said, but there was tension in his shoulders now, a recognition that this was more serious than a simple border dispute. I'm king by right of combat. My authority doesn't require their approval. True, Tobias agreed. But your authority does require the loyalty of the packs you claim to lead. And that loyalty is wavering, Raymond. Because you've broken the most fundamental rule of our kind, you've elevated weakness instead of culling it. You've chosen a mate who brings nothing to your bloodline except shame and deficiency. And the packs are questioning whether a king who makes such poor choices deserves to lead them. She's not weak, Raymond bit out. She's stronger than any of you could comprehend. And if the packs are too blind to see that, then perhaps they need new leadership. Leadership that isn't so mired in outdated traditions and prejudice that they can't recognize power when it's standing right in front of them. Power. Tobias laughed, harsh and mocking. She can't shift. Can't fight. Can't contribute to pack defense or breeding. What power could she possibly have? More than you'll ever know, Raymond said. And more than I'm willing to demonstrate to wolves who come onto my territory making threats and questioning my judgment. You've delivered your message. Now leave before I forget that sacred ground is supposed to prevent bloodshed. For a moment, Jessica thought Tobias would push it. Would force a confrontation that would end in violence and potentially war. But something in Raymond's eyes must have convinced him that retreat was wiser, because he shifted back to wolf form without another word, his pack following suit. They disappeared into the trees, leaving nothing but the acrid smell of their disdain and the implicit threat hanging in the air like smoke. Raymond didn't relax until they were gone, and even then his body remained tense, coiled like a spring ready to snap. That was about more than just questioning your choice, Jessica said quietly. They want you gone. They see me as the excuse they need to challenge your authority. I know. Raymond turned to face her, and the pain in his eyes made her chest ache. And they're not wrong that you've complicated things. That taking you as my mate has given my enemies ammunition they didn't have before. But Jessica, I need you to understand, I don't regret it. I won't regret it, even if it costs me the crown. You're more important than power. More important than politics. And if I have to choose between being king and being your mate, I'll choose you every single time. You shouldn't have to choose, she said, anger rising in her chest. Not at him, but at the situation. At wolves like Tobias, who saw strength only in violence and shifting, who couldn't comprehend that power came in forms they'd never been taught to recognize. This is exactly what they want. To force you into an impossible position where you lose no matter what you decide. Then we don't play their game. Raymond's expression hardened into something calculating. We go to their gathering. We show them exactly what you are. We make them understand that you're not a weakness, you're an evolution. And if they still can't accept that, if they still want to challenge my authority over this, then I'll handle it the way I've always handled challenges. With force and finality. You're talking about war, Jessica whispered. I'm talking about survival. He cupped her face in his hands, gentle despite the violence simmering beneath his skin. Yours and mine. Because they're not going to stop, Jessica. Tobias and the wolves who think like him, they see you as a threat to their worldview. And they'll either try to force me to reject you or they'll try to eliminate you altogether. Either way, we need to be ready to fight back. I don't know how to fight, she said, hating how small her voice sounded. I don't even know how to access whatever power the Grove says I have. How am I supposed to help you when I can barely help myself? You're going to learn. Raymond's voice was firm, brooking no argument. We have 3 days before the gathering. 3 days to unlock whatever's dormant inside you. 3 days to prepare for the fight of our lives. And I promise you, by the time we face the council, they're going to regret ever underestimating you. He kissed her forehead then, brief and chaste, but weighted with meaning, before taking her hand and leading her back toward his estate. Jessica followed, her mind racing with everything that had just happened. The revelation in the Grove. The threat from Tobias. The impossible task of proving her worth to wolves who'd already decided she had none. 3 days. That's all they had. 3 days to figure out what she was and how to survive what was coming. 3 days to decide if she was brave enough to fight for a future she'd never dared to imagine for herself. As they walked through the forest, Jessica felt something shift inside her. A spark of defiance, maybe. Or determination. The Blackwood Pack had spent 18 years trying to convince her she was worthless. And she'd almost let them succeed. Almost let them define her entire existence by their hatred and contempt. But Raymond saw something different in her. The Grove had confirmed something ancient and powerful. And now an entire council of wolves was threatened enough by her existence to demand her rejection. Maybe that meant something. Maybe that meant she wasn't worthless after all. Maybe it was time to stop letting other people tell her who she was and start figuring it out for herself. Even if it terrified her. Even if it meant becoming something she didn't understand yet. Even if it meant standing beside a king and facing down an entire world that wanted them both to fail. She squeezed Raymond's hand, feeling him squeeze back, and made a silent vow. They wanted a fight? They'd get one. And she'd be damned if she let them win. The next 3 days blurred together in a haze of exhaustion and revelation. Raymond brought in his best trainers, wolves who specialized in combat, in strategy, in the kind of controlled violence that kept packs safe. But more importantly, he brought in Marin and 2 other healers, older women with kind eyes and ancient knowledge, who understood abilities that fell outside the normal scope of wolf magic. They worked with Jessica from dawn until dusk, pushing her to access the power the Grove had insisted she carried. Meditation exercises that left her frustrated and empty-handed. Physical trials designed to trigger defensive instincts she didn't seem to possess. Hours spent with her hands pressed against stones and earth and water, searching for a connection that refused to manifest. By the second evening, Jessica was ready to give up. She sat in the training yard behind the estate, her body aching from drills that had accomplished nothing, her mind exhausted from trying to force something that clearly didn't exist. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose, and all she could think about was how disappointed everyone must be. How Raymond had staked everything on her being special, and she was proving to be exactly what the Blackwood Pack had always said, broken and useless. You're thinking too loud. Raymond's voice came from behind her, gentle with understanding. I can hear the doubt from inside the house. She didn't turn around. Maybe they're right. Tobias and the council. Maybe the Grove made a mistake. Maybe I'm just... Don't. He moved around to face her, crouching down so they were eye level. Don't let them into your head. Don't give them that power over you. It's not about giving them power, Jessica said bitterly. It's about facing reality. We've been at this for 2 days, and I haven't managed to do a single thing that would indicate I'm anything other than ordinary. Less than ordinary, actually, since I can't even shift. You're healing faster than any wolf I've ever seen, Raymond pointed out. The wounds on your wrists should still be raw. They're almost completely healed. That's not nothing. That's not enough to convince a council that I'm worth protecting. That I'm worth risking your crown for. Raymond was quiet for a moment, studying her face in the fading light. Then he stood and offered his hand. Come with me. There's something I want to show you. Jessica almost refused. Almost told him she was too tired, too discouraged, too afraid of failing again. But something in his expression stopped her. A vulnerability she hadn't seen before. A need that had nothing to do with the mate bond and everything to do with the man beneath the title. She took his hand and let him pull her to her feet. He led her away from the training yard, away from the estate entirely, following a path that wound up into the hills behind his territory. They walked in silence, Raymond still holding her hand, his thumb tracing absent patterns against her skin that might have been soothing or might have been unconscious. The path ended at a clearing overlooking the entire valley, the estate sprawled below them, lights beginning to flicker on as darkness crept across the land. It was breathtaking. Peaceful in a way that made Jessica's chest ache with something that felt dangerously close to longing. I come here when I need to remember why I do this, Raymond said quietly, staring out at his territory. When the weight of being king gets too heavy and I start questioning whether any of it matters. This view reminds me. All those lights down there, every single one represents a life I'm responsible for. A wolf who trusts me to keep them safe, to make the right decisions, to be strong enough to protect them from threats they can't fight alone. He turned to look at her, and the moonlight caught the gold threading through his eyes. I've carried that responsibility alone for so long, he continued. Told myself it was better that way. That I couldn't afford the distraction of caring about someone more than I cared about the pack. And then you happened. And suddenly all those careful walls I'd built, all those reasons I'd given myself for staying isolated, they didn't matter anymore. Because my wolf looked at you and knew. This is what we've been missing. This is what makes all the fighting and sacrifice and loneliness worth it. Raymond, Jessica started, but he shook his head. Let me finish. Please. He took a breath, like he was gathering courage. The council is going to demand that I reject you. That I choose between my crown and my mate. And I need you to understand that I've already made that choice. I chose you the moment I caught your scent. I'll choose you tomorrow at the gathering. I'll choose you for the rest of my life, regardless of what it costs me. You can't mean that, Jessica whispered. You give up everything you've built? Everything you fought for? For someone you barely know. I know everything that matters, he said simply. I know you're brave, because you survived 18 years in a pack that tried to destroy you and somehow came out the other side, still capable of compassion. I know you're strong, because you're standing here trying to learn control over a power you can't even feel yet instead of running from it. And I know you're worth more than any crown, any territory, any amount of political power I could ever accumulate. Tears burned at the back of Jessica's eyes. Stop saying things like that. Why? He stepped closer, his hand coming up to cup her cheek. Because it scares you? Because you're not used to being valued? Or because some part of you is starting to believe it might be true? All of the above, Jessica thought but couldn't say. Because admitting that would mean admitting she was starting to care about him too. Starting to see past the terrifying king to the lonely man underneath. Starting to want things she'd convinced herself were impossible for someone like her. I don't know how to be what you need, she said instead, her voice breaking. I don't know how to stand beside a king. How to face down a council of wolves who hate me. How to be strong enough that you don't regret choosing me. You already are, Raymond murmured. You're already everything I need, Jessica. You just can't see it yet because they spent so long convincing you that you weren't. But I see it. My wolf sees it. And eventually, you'll see it too. He leaned in slowly, giving her time to pull away, to reject this, to maintain the distance she'd been clinging to since the night he'd claimed her. But Jessica didn't pull away. Couldn't pull away. Because something in his words, in the absolute certainty with which he spoke them, had cracked through the last of her defenses. When his lips met hers, it wasn't desperate or demanding. It was gentle, reverent. Like he was asking a question instead of taking an answer. And when she kissed him back, tentatively at first, then with more confidence, she felt something shift inside her chest. Not the mate bond, she still couldn't feel that. But something else. Something that felt like hope, maybe. Or trust. Or the first fragile shoots of something that might eventually grow into love if she was brave enough to let it. They broke apart slowly, Raymond resting his forehead against hers, both of them breathing hard. I'm terrified, Jessica admitted in a whisper. Of tomorrow. Of failing you. Of not being enough. So am I, he confessed. Terrified of losing you. Of not being able to protect you from what's coming. Of watching them try to take away the only good thing that's ever happened to me. He pulled back just enough to meet her eyes. But I'm not going to let fear make my decisions anymore. And I need you to try to do the same. We face this together, Jessica. Not because you have some mystical power you can't access yet. Not because you need to prove your worth to wolves who wouldn't recognize it if it bit them. But because you're mine and I'm yours, and that means something. It means everything. Together, Jessica repeated, testing the word. Testing the concept of not being alone for the first time in her life. Even if I can't unlock whatever the Grove says I have? Even if I go into that gathering tomorrow exactly as I am right now, wolfless and powerless and nothing like what they expect. Especially then, Raymond said fiercely. Because you're not nothing, Jessica. You're everything that matters. And if they can't see that, then they're the ones who are broken, not you. He kissed her again, deeper this time, and Jessica let herself fall into it. Let herself feel wanted and valued and cherished in a way she'd never experienced. Let herself imagine a future where she stood beside this man not as his weakness, but as his equal, regardless of what form her strength eventually took. When they finally pulled apart, the moon had risen fully, bathing the clearing in silver light that made everything feel magical. Otherworldly. Like they'd stepped outside of time for a moment and existed in a space where politics and prejudice couldn't touch them. We should get back, Raymond said reluctantly. You need rest before tomorrow. And I need to brief my warriors on security protocols for the gathering. Will there be violence? Jessica asked, though she already knew the answer. Probably. He didn't insult her by lying. The council is looking for an excuse to challenge me. And if I refuse to reject you, they'll likely try to force the issue. But I have loyal wolves, Jessica. Strong wolves who believe in what we're building here. They'll stand with us. We won't be alone. They walked back to the estate hand in hand, and Jessica marveled at how natural it felt. How right. She'd spent so long being afraid of him, convinced he was just another alpha who would hurt her, use her, discard her when she proved insufficient. But Raymond wasn't like that. Wasn't like anyone she'd ever known. He walked her to her door and paused, clearly reluctant to leave her. Will you be all right tonight? He asked. I can post guards outside your room if you'd feel safer. I'll be fine, Jessica interrupted gently. But Raymond? Thank you. For everything you set up there. For seeing something in me that I can't see yet. For not giving up even when I was ready to. Something warm and devastated crossed his face. I'll never give up on you, he said. Never. No matter what happens tomorrow or any day after. You're stuck with me, Jessica. Whether you want to be or not. I think I might want to be, she admitted, and watched his expression transform into something so hopeful it hurt to witness. I'm not ready to call it love. I'm not even sure I understand what we are to each other beyond this bond you feel. But I want to find out. I want to try. That's all I need, he said, his voice rough with emotion. Just try. Just give us a chance. The rest will figure itself out. He kissed her forehead, lingering there for a moment like he was memorizing the feel of her, before forcing himself to step back. Sleep well, he said. And try not to worry too much about tomorrow. Whatever happens, we'll face it together. He left before she could respond, disappearing down the hall like he didn't trust himself to stay away if he lingered any longer. Jessica watched him go, then entered her room and locked the door behind her. She stood at the window for a long time, staring out at the moonlit grounds, replaying his words in her mind. You're already everything I need. You're worth more than any crown. I'll never give up on you. Words she'd never thought anyone would say to her. Words that were starting to reshape the way she saw herself, slowly chipping away at 18 years of being told she was worthless. Tomorrow, they'd face the council. Tomorrow, she'd probably fail to demonstrate the power everyone expected her to have. Tomorrow, everything might fall apart. But tonight, in this moment, she felt something she'd never felt before. Cherished. And maybe that was enough. Maybe that was the real power the Grove had been talking about, not magic or abilities, but the strength that came from finally believing you deserved to be valued. Jessica climbed into bed and closed her eyes, and for the first time since Raymond had claimed her, she didn't dream of fear and violence. She dreamed of standing beside a king, facing down a world that wanted them to fail and refusing to break. She dreamed of being enough. And when morning came, when it was time to face the gathering that might destroy everything they were building, she'd carry that dream with her like armor. Because Raymond believed in her. And maybe it was time she started believing in herself. The Convergence grounds were exactly as brutal as Jessica had imagined. A massive stone amphitheater carved into the mountainside, ancient and imposing, designed to hold hundreds of wolves and amplify every sound, every judgment, every condemnation. Alphas from across the territories had gathered, their packs arranged in rigid formations behind them, all eyes tracking Raymond and Jessica as they entered the arena. The hatred was palpable. Jessica could feel it pressing against her skin like a physical weight, could see it in the curled lips and narrowed eyes of wolves who'd decided her fate before ever meeting her. She wore the formal dress Marin had chosen, deep forest green that somehow made her look less fragile, more regal, but no amount of beautiful clothing could hide what she was. Wolfless. Mateless as far as they could tell. A stain on their king's judgment. Raymond walked beside her with his head high, his hand resting at the small of her back in a gesture that was both possessive and protective. He dressed for war, black tactical clothing that allowed for easy movement, weapons visible at his hips and thighs, his entire demeanor radiating controlled violence. His pack flanked them, 20 of his strongest warriors arranged in a protective formation that screamed, "We dare you to try something." "Remember what we discussed," Raymond murmured as they approached the center of the arena. "Stay close to me. Don't react to anything they say. And if things go wrong, you run. My wolves will get you out." "I'm not running," Jessica said quietly. "We agreed. Together." Pain and pride warred in his expression, but he didn't argue. Just squeezed her hand once before releasing it, facing the assembled council with the kind of confidence that came from knowing he could kill every wolf here if he needed to. Tobias stood at the head of the council table, flanked by 6 other regional alphas, all of them older, all of them radiating disapproval. Behind them, pack representatives filled the stadium seating, hundreds of wolves gathered to witness either Raymond's vindication or his downfall. "Alpha King," Tobias began, his voice carrying across the arena. "Thank you for accepting our invitation. We have grave concerns to address regarding your recent choices." "State your concerns," Raymond said flatly. And make it quick. I have better things to do than listen to old wolves complain about changes they don't understand. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Several alphas bristled at the disrespect. But Tobias just smiled, like Raymond's arrogance was exactly what he'd been hoping for. Very well. To the point then. Tobias gestured toward Jessica with barely concealed contempt. You've claimed this girl as your mate. A wolfless runt from a pack that rightfully tried to cull her during their cleansing ritual. You killed Alpha Vance to take her, destabilized the Blackwood territory, and brought her here to parade around as if she were worthy of standing beside the most powerful alpha in our territories. I killed Vance because he was abusive scum, Raymond corrected coldly. Because he was torturing pack members and preparing to execute an innocent wolf for the crime of being different. And I took Jessica because she's my fated mate. Because my wolf recognized her the moment I caught her scent. Everything else is irrelevant. Irrelevant. Another alpha spoke up, a woman with silver hair and cruel eyes. The strength of our bloodlines is irrelevant? The precedent you're setting for other packs is irrelevant? If the strongest among us starts accepting defective mates, what message does that send to the rest of our kind? It sends the message that strength comes in forms you're too narrow-minded to recognize, Raymond shot back. That maybe our definitions of power need to evolve beyond physical dominance and the ability to shift. She can't even feel the bond. Tobias's voice rose, triumphant. Can you, girl? Can you feel what he claims to feel? Can you sense the connection that's supposed to make you his perfect match? All eyes turned to Jessica. The weight of their judgment, their disgust, their certainty that she was nothing threatened to crush her where she stood. She wanted to lie, to tell them yes, she felt everything, just to make this easier for Raymond. But she couldn't. Wouldn't build whatever future they might have on a foundation of lies. No, she said clearly, lifting her chin despite the fear coursing through her. I can't feel the mate bond. I've never been able to feel pack bonds or wolf instincts. But that doesn't mean the bond doesn't exist. It just means I experience it differently. Differently, Tobias repeated mockingly. Or not at all. Tell me, King, how convenient is it that you've claimed a mate who can't verify the bond? Who can't prove through any measure our kind recognizes that she's actually connected to you? For all we know, you've simply gone mad. Attached yourself to a broken wolf out of some misguided sense of nobility or rebellion against tradition. My wolf knows, Raymond growled, and the temperature in the arena seemed to drop. That's all the proof I need. Your wolf, Tobias said, is making you weak. Look at you. The great Alpha King, the wolf who's never lost a challenge, the leader who was supposed to guide us into a new era of strength and unity, reduced to defending his choice to mate with a creature who contributes nothing to your bloodline, your pack, or your legacy. She contributes everything that matters, Raymond bit out. Does she? Tobias gestured broadly to the assembled wolves. Then prove it. Show us this power you claim she has. Demonstrate why she's worth the instability you've created, the divisions you've caused, the weakness you've shown by refusing to put pack welfare above your own desires. The trap closed around them with audible finality. Jessica's stomach dropped because this was exactly what they'd feared. The demand for proof she couldn't provide. The public humiliation designed to force Raymond into an impossible choice. She doesn't need to prove anything to you, Raymond said, but there was desperation creeping into his voice now. The fact that she's mine is enough. It's not enough. The silver-haired alpha stood, her expression carved from ice. Not for this council. Not for the packs you claim to lead. We demand proof of this bond, or we demand you reject her and choose a mate worthy of your position. Those are your options, King. Choose wisely. And if I refuse both options? Silence fell across the arena, heavy and threatening. Then we challenge your right to lead, Tobias said quietly. We declare you unfit to be Alpha King on the grounds of compromised judgment and dangerous instability. We strip your title and divide your territory among more suitable leaders. And we eliminate the source of your madness to ensure you have the opportunity to recover your senses. Eliminate. They were talking about killing her. Right here, in front of everyone, if Raymond didn't comply with their demands. Jessica felt her heart hammering against her ribs, felt Raymond's warriors tensing around them, preparing for violence that would turn this gathering into a bloodbath. She looked at Raymond and saw the war raging behind his eyes, the Alpha King who couldn't show weakness warring with the mate who would burn the world down before letting anyone hurt her. You want proof? Raymond's voice was dangerously quiet. Fine. But when I provide it, when you see exactly what she is and what she's capable of, you're all going to regret demanding this. You're going to understand exactly how badly you've miscalculated. He turned to Jessica, and the apology in his eyes broke her heart. I need you to trust me, he said softly, just for her. One more time. Trust me. Before she could ask what he meant, before she could process what was happening, Raymond's hand shot out and gripped her wrist. Not gently. Not the careful touches he'd been using since he'd claimed her. This was firm, commanding, and laced with something that felt like power. Show them, he said, his eyes blazing gold. Show them what you are. What we are together. And then she felt it, a surge of energy pouring into her through his touch, wild and electric and absolutely overwhelming. It was his wolf, his power, his strength flowing into her like a circuit finally completing. And everywhere it touched inside her, something dormant sparked to life. Pain exploded through Jessica's body. Not the pain of injury, but of awakening. Of power that had been sleeping for 18 years, suddenly ripping free of constraints she'd never known existed. She gasped, stumbling, and Raymond caught her, holding her upright while energy crackled between them, visible to every wolf watching. Let it out, Raymond commanded, his voice layered with alpha compulsion and something deeper. Something that resonated with whatever was waking inside her. Stop fighting it. Stop trying to control it. Just let it be what it is. Jessica wanted to refuse. Wanted to pull away from the overwhelming sensation of too much, too fast, too powerful. But she'd promised to trust him. Promised to try. So instead of fighting, she surrendered. And the world exploded into silver flame. It poured from her skin like light made tangible, cascading outward in waves that made the assembled wolves stumble back, shielding their eyes. It wasn't fire, not exactly, but it burned with an intensity that made the air itself shimmer. Ancient power, the kind that predated pack bonds and shifting, the kind that the Grove had whispered about. The original gift, awakened at last. Jessica stood at the center of the maelstrom, Raymond's hand still gripping her wrist, anchoring her to reality while power beyond her comprehension poured through her. She could feel it now, every wolf in the arena, their life forces like candle flames she could snuff out with a thought. Could feel the earth beneath her feet responding to her presence, the stones of the amphitheater humming with recognition. Could feel threads of connection spreading outward, ancient and sacred, linking her to something vast and unknowable. And beneath it all, she could finally feel him. Raymond. The mate bond that had been invisible to her before blazed into clarity, a golden thread connecting their souls, showing her everything he felt. The desperate love. The fierce protectiveness. The absolute certainty that she was worth any cost. It was beautiful. Overwhelming. Terrifying. And it was hers. The silver flame began to recede as Jessica learned to breathe around the power, learned to hold it instead of being consumed by it. When the light finally faded, she stood in the center of a circle of scorched earth, Raymond beside her, both of them radiating residual energy that made every instinct in every wolf scream danger. The arena was silent. Completely, utterly silent. Then Tobias started laughing. It wasn't the sound of defeat. It was triumph. Well, he said, his voice carrying clearly across the shocked stillness. That's certainly impressive. Terrifying, even. Which is exactly why she can't be allowed to exist. Jessica's blood ran cold. You just proved our point, King, Tobias continued, his expression victorious. She's not just effective, she's dangerous. That kind of power, in the hands of someone who can't shift, who can't be controlled through normal pack bonds. She's a threat to every wolf here. A weapon that could destroy us all if she loses control. She won't lose control, Raymond snarled. I'm her anchor, her mate. As long as I'm with her. As long as you're with her, you'll be compromised, the silver-haired alpha interrupted. Unable to make rational decisions because you're too busy protecting her. Too busy being her safety net. You've just demonstrated exactly why this bond is dangerous, Raymond. Why she makes you weak. Other voices joined in, agreement spreading through the council like poison. She needs to be eliminated. For the safety of all packs. Before she destroys everything we've built. Enough. Raymond's roar silenced them, but Jessica could see the trap closing. Could see how perfectly Tobias had orchestrated this. Demand proof of her power, then use that power as justification for her execution. Make Raymond the villain regardless of what choice he made. You want her dead, Raymond said, his voice deadly quiet. You want to take my mate from me and call it justice. Call it safety. But here's what's actually going to happen. Anyone who tries to hurt her dies. Anyone who votes to eliminate her becomes my enemy. And I promise you, I will hunt down every single wolf who threatens her, and I will make them remember why I'm king. Not because I inherited a title, but because I earned it in blood. Then you're declaring war on the council, Tobias said. On every pack that values stability over your personal obsession. You're choosing her over all of us. Yes, Raymond said simply. Every single time. And if that makes me your enemy, then so be it. But know this, when you come for her, you come for me. And I've never lost a war I chose to fight. The arena erupted into chaos. Alphas shouting threats and challenges. Warriors drawing weapons. The fragile piece of the territory shattering in real time. And Jessica stood at the center of it all, silver flame still flickering at her fingertips, finally understanding the terrible truth the Grove had tried to warn her about. Her power could change everything. Could unite the packs or destroy them. But only if she survived long enough to learn how to wield it. Only if Raymond could protect her from an entire world that had just voted her too dangerous to live. She looked at him, this king who'd chosen her over everything, and saw her own determination reflected in his eyes. They'd wanted proof? They'd gotten it. Now they'd have to live with the consequences. Or die trying to prevent them. The chaos erupted into violence before Jessica could draw breath. 3 wolves lunged from the council seating, shifting midair, their intent clear, eliminate the threat before she could use that terrible power again. Raymond moved like lightning, intercepting the first attacker with a savagery that was beautiful and horrifying, his claws tearing through fur and flesh before the wolf even hit the ground. His warriors formed a defensive circle around Jessica, weapons drawn, teeth bared, ready to die protecting their king's mate. But the attackers kept coming. Not just 3. Dozens. Wolves from multiple packs, all convinced that killing her was the only way to preserve their way of life. All willing to risk Raymond's wrath for what they believed was the greater good. Jessica, run. Raymond roared, blood spattering his face as he tore into another attacker. My wolves will get you out. No. The word came from somewhere deep inside her, somewhere that had awakened with the silver flame. Somewhere that was tired of running, tired of being the victim, tired of letting others fight battles that were fundamentally about her existence. No more running. She felt the power coiling inside her, wild and hungry and begging to be released. Felt the threads connecting her to every life force in the arena, felt how easy it would be to snuff them out, to burn away the threat with the same silver flame that had scorched the earth at her feet. But that wasn't who she wanted to be. Wasn't the kind of power she wanted to claim. The Grove had called her child of the first flame. Had said she carried the original gift, the blessing that existed before the goddess divided it into lesser forms. But the voice had also said something else, something she'd almost forgotten in the chaos of the past 3 days. You are what we were before we became what we are. You are the beginning. The beginning. Not destruction. Not an ending. the beginning of something new. Jessica closed her eyes and reached inward, past the fear and the anger, past the instinct to lash out at the wolves trying to kill her. Reached for the core of the power humming in her chest, and instead of unleashing it as a weapon, she transformed it into something else. A command. Ancient and undeniable. The voice of the first wolves, before they learned to hate difference, before they built hierarchies on violence and strength. Stop. The word didn't come from her mouth. It came from everywhere. From the stones beneath their feet. From the air itself. From some primal place that every wolf carried in their DNA, the memory of what they'd been before civilization taught them cruelty. Every wolf in the arena froze. Mid-attack, mid-shift, mid-breath. Frozen not by force, but by recognition. By something in their blood responding to a call they'd never heard, but had always known was possible. Jessica opened her eyes, and they blazed silver, power made visible, made undeniable. Listen to me. Her voice carried across the amphitheater without her needing to shout, amplified by the same ancient magic that had frozen them in place. All of you. Every wolf who came here today convinced that I need to die. Every alpha who voted to eliminate me because my power frightens you. Listen. She could feel Raymond behind her, his wolf howling with pride and terror and love so intense it threatened to break her concentration. Could feel his warrior standing down, recognizing that this moment belonged to her alone. You're right to be afraid, Jessica continued, walking forward through the frozen wolves, past warriors locked mid-lunge, past alphas caught with challenges dying on their lips. This power is terrifying. I can feel each of you right now. Feel your life forces like threads I could cut with a thought. Feel how easy it would be to burn away everyone who's ever hurt me, everyone who's ever called me broken, everyone who voted just now to end my life for the crime of being different. She reached the council table where Tobias stood frozen, his expression caught between fury and fear. I could kill all of you, she said softly, her words cutting through the silence like knives. Could make you understand exactly what it feels like to be powerless. To be at someone else's mercy. To know that your life depends entirely on whether someone stronger than you decides you deserve to live. Tobias's eyes tracked her movement, the only part of him still capable of motion, and she saw the moment he understood. The moment he realized she held his life in her hands, and there was nothing he could do to stop her if she chose to take it. But I'm not going to do that, Jessica said, stepping back. Because that would make me exactly what you accused me of being. A threat. A weapon. Something that needs to be controlled or destroyed. And I refuse to let your fear define who I become. She turned to face the entire arena, her power still holding them frozen, her voice still carrying that ancient resonance that made their wolves whimper in submission. The Grove of Elders told me I carry the original gift. The power that existed before the moon goddess divided her blessing into forms you recognize, shifting, healing, pack bonds. I am what our kind was before we forgot. Before we started measuring worth by physical strength and the ability to transform. Before we began culling those who were different instead of celebrating what they might contribute. She let the silver flame flicker to life in her palm, watched it dance across her fingers like living light. This power terrifies you because it falls outside your understanding. Because you can't control it through normal hierarchies. Because it means someone you deemed worthless might actually be more powerful than any of you. But here's what you need to understand: I don't want to rule you. Don't want to destroy you. Don't want anything except the right to exist without having to constantly prove my worth to wolves who've already decided I have none. Jessica walked back to Raymond, feeling the bond between them blazing brighter with every step, feeling his love and pride and absolute faith in her wrapping around her like armor. This man, she said, gesturing to Raymond, saw worth in me when no one else did. Fought for me when I'd accepted my own death. Offered me protection and choice, and the first kindness I'd experienced in 18 years. And you want to punish him for that? Want to strip his title and divide his territory because he refused to sacrifice his mate for your comfort? She let the words hang in the air, let them sink into the consciousness of every frozen wolf. "So here's what's going to happen," Jessica said, her voice hardening. "I'm going to release you. All of you. And you're going to make a choice. You can continue fighting, continue trying to eliminate the threat you think I represent, and force me to defend myself with power I'm still learning to control. Or you can accept that your understanding of strength was incomplete. That maybe our kind needs to evolve. That maybe someone who carries the original gift might be exactly what the territories need to remember what we were supposed to be." She closed her fist, and the silver flame extinguished. "Choose wisely," she said, "because I won't freeze you again. Next time, I'll let Raymond and his warriors protect me the way they're trained to. And I promise you that will end in far more blood than any of us want spilled today." Jessica released her hold on the arena. The frozen wolves stumbled, gasping, their bodies remembering motion, their minds reeling from the experience of being completely, utterly helpless. Several dropped to their knees, overwhelmed. Others retreated, backing toward the exits, wanting nothing more than to escape the presence of something they couldn't comprehend. But none of them attacked. None of them resumed the violence that had been seconds away from becoming a massacre. Tobias straightened slowly, his expression unreadable. For a long moment, he just stared at Jessica, measuring, calculating, trying to decide if she was an opportunity or a threat too great to tolerate. "You could have killed me," he said finally. "Could have made an example of the alpha who led the charge against you. Why didn't you?" "Because I'm not interested in revenge," Jessica said tiredly. "I'm interested in survival. In peace. In the possibility that maybe we can all exist in the same world without constantly fighting over who deserves to." "You sound naive," Tobias said, but there was less venom in his voice now. "More respect, maybe. Or fear masquerading as respect. Peace requires strength. Requires the weak accepting their place so the strong can maintain order. Peace requires evolution," Jessica countered. "Requires accepting that our definitions of strength might be outdated. That maybe the wolf who can unite instead of divide, who can protect instead of dominate, who can build instead of destroy, maybe that wolf is stronger than any of us realized." The silver-haired alpha spoke up, her voice careful. "You're proposing we accept you. Accept this power we don't understand. Accept that our king has bound himself to something that could destroy us all if it goes wrong." "I'm proposing you stop trying to kill me for existing," Jessica said bluntly. "Beyond that, I don't care what you accept. I don't need your approval to live. But I'd prefer not to have to spend the rest of my life looking over my shoulder, waiting for the next assassination attempt, forcing Raymond to choose between protecting me and leading his pack." She felt Raymond move closer, his presence solid and steady behind her, his hand coming to rest on her shoulder in a gesture that was both supportive and possessive. "She's right," he said, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. "This ends now. Either you accept that she's my mate, that she's under my protection, that any threat against her is a declaration of war against me, or we settle this the old way. Single combat. Me against anyone who wants to challenge my right to choose my own mate. Winner takes everything. Loser dies." The challenge hung in the air like a guillotine blade. Because everyone here knew Raymond's reputation. Knew he'd never lost a challenge. Knew that facing him in single combat was essentially suicide unless you were absolutely certain you were strong enough to win. No one stepped forward. Tobias looked around at his fellow alphas, reading the room, understanding that the momentum had shifted. That Jessica's display of power followed by her restraint had accomplished what violence never could. It had made them question whether destroying her was worth the cost. "I won't accept her," Tobias said finally. "Won't pretend to understand what she is or believe she's safe. But I won't actively work to eliminate her either. As long as she stays in your territory, King, as long as her power doesn't threaten my pack, I'll consider this matter settled." It wasn't friendship. Wasn't even alliance. But it was survival. It was enough. Other alphas nodded their agreement, some reluctant, some relieved to have an excuse to back down. The silver-haired alpha studied Jessica for a long moment before speaking. The grove recognized her, she said thoughtfully. The ancestors called to her. That means something, whether we like it or not. I won't stand against a wolf blessed by the elders, even if her blessing takes a form I don't understand. Slowly, grudgingly, the council reached consensus. They would leave Jessica alone, would stop actively trying to eliminate her, would give Raymond the space to keep his mate without stripping his authority. It wasn't acceptance, but it was acknowledgement. And for now, that would have to be enough. As the gathering began to disperse, wolves retreating to their respective territories with their pride wounded, but their lives intact, Raymond pulled Jessica into his arms. That was the bravest thing I've ever witnessed, he murmured against her hair. And the most terrifying. When you froze the entire arena, when I felt the scope of your power. You thought I'd kill them, Jessica finished quietly. No. He pulled back to look at her, his eyes fierce with emotion. I thought you'd become exactly what you are, extraordinary. Powerful. Merciful when you had every right to be vengeful. You proved today that you're not just my equal, Jessica. You're better than any of us. Better than we deserve. Tears burned at the back of her eyes, not from sadness, but from relief. From the overwhelming realization that she'd survived. That they'd survived. That the world hadn't ended even though it had felt inevitable. Can we go home? She asked. Please? I just want to go home. Yes, Raymond said, his arms tightening around her. We're going home. He led her from the arena, his warriors surrounding them, protecting them from any wolves who might have second thoughts about the truce. But no one attacked. No one even approached. They just watched as the Alpha King and his impossible mate walked away, both of them radiating power that made the very air shimmer with potential. Jessica leaned into Raymond's strength, letting him support her as the adrenaline faded and exhaustion crashed over her in waves. She'd done it. Had faced down an entire council, had unlocked power she still barely understood, had chosen mercy over vengeance even when violence would have been easier. And she'd survived. They both had. 3 months later, Jessica stood in the same clearing where Raymond had first brought her, watching the sun set over the valley. So much had changed since that terrified girl had agreed to visit the grove. So much had transformed in ways she never could have predicted. The power was still there, still humming beneath her skin, but she learned to control it. Learned to access it without Raymond's anchor, though his presence still made it easier, still made her feel more complete. The healers had helped her understand what she carried, not just the original gift, but a bridge between what wolves had been and what they might become. Some packs had started sending their different ones to her. The wolves who couldn't shift properly, who manifested abilities outside normal parameters, who'd been culled or exiled for being wrong. She taught them what the grove had taught her, that different didn't mean broken. That power came in forms their ancestors had forgotten, but might remember if they were brave enough to try. Raymond's territory had become a sanctuary. A place where wolves who didn't fit traditional hierarchies could find acceptance. It made them enemies among the old guard, allies among those ready for change. The territories were shifting, evolving, deciding whether to cling to the past or embrace an uncertain future. And through it all, Raymond stood beside her. Not behind her, not in front of her, but beside her, partners in building something new from the ruins of what had been. She heard him approach before he spoke, the mate bond she could finally feel singing with awareness of his presence. Thinking too loud again, he said, wrapping his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. Just remembering, Jessica murmured, leaning back into his warmth. How terrified I was that first night. How certain I was that you were going to kill me. And now? Now I'm terrified of different things, she admitted. Of the responsibility we're carrying. Of the wolves counting on us to be right about this new way forward. Of failing them the way my pack failed me. You won't, Raymond said with absolute certainty. Because you understand what it means to be powerless. To be deemed worthless. You'll never let another wolf feel that way if you can prevent it. That's what makes you the perfect person to lead this change. We're leading it, she corrected. Together. Together, he agreed, turning her to face him. Always together. That's what the bond means. That's what we mean. He kissed her then, slow and deep and full of promises they'd spent 3 months learning to keep. Promises of partnership and protection and a love that had grown from a biological imperative into something real, something chosen, something that would last long after the initial madness of the mate bond faded. When they pulled apart, Jessica looked out over the valley again, at the lights beginning to flicker on in Raymond's estate, their estate now. At the world they were reshaping one different wolf at a time. Do you ever regret it? She asked quietly. Choosing me? Starting this whole thing that's made you so many enemies. Every day, Raymond said, and when she stiffened, he smiled. I regret not finding you sooner. Not being there to protect you from the years of abuse before I caught your scent. Not being able to save you from every moment of pain you endured. But choosing you? Fighting for you? Building this future with you? Those are the only decisions I've ever made that I know, without question, were absolutely right. Jessica felt tears slip down her cheeks, the happy kind that came from being loved so completely you could hardly believe it was real. I love you, she whispered. I don't know if I've said it clearly enough, but I do. I love you. I know, Raymond murmured, wiping her tears with gentle thumbs. I've known since you chose to stay. Since you decided I was worth the risk of trusting. I've known, and I've been grateful every moment since. They stood together as darkness fell, as stars began to emerge overhead, as the world they were building continued to spin toward an uncertain future. Behind them, in the estate, wolves who'd been rejected by their packs were finding family. Finding purpose. Finding proof that they'd never been broken at all, just different, just ahead of their time, just waiting for someone brave enough to see their worth. And ahead of them, the grove stood silent and sacred, holding the memories of what their kind had been and the promise of what they might become. Would it work? This revolution they'd started? This attempt to reshape wolf society into something more inclusive, more compassionate, more willing to embrace difference instead of destroying it? Jessica didn't know. Couldn't know. The future was written in choices not yet made, in battles not yet fought, in wolves not yet brave enough to choose evolution over tradition. But she knew one thing with absolute certainty. She would keep fighting, keep building, keep proving that the girl they'd tried to execute for being wolfless was exactly what their world needed, a reminder that strength came in forms they'd forgotten to measure, that power looked different than they'd been taught, that sometimes the most dangerous thing you could do was decide someone else didn't deserve to exist. Raymond squeezed her hand, and through the bond she felt his determination matching hers. His promise that whatever came next, they would face it the way they'd faced everything since that rain-soaked night when he'd lost control and found his mate. Together. Always together. Would you have chosen her side? Would you have looked at a wolfless girl and seen potential instead of failure? Would you have been brave enough to defend someone the world had already condemned? Or would you have joined the voices calling for her elimination, convinced that different always means dangerous? These are the questions that haunt our kind. The choices that define whether we evolve or stagnate, whether we build bridges or burn them, whether we create space for those who don't fit or destroy them for daring to exist outside our understanding. Jessica was just one girl. One rejected wolf who refused to accept the story they'd written for her. But her choice to fight, to claim her power, to stand beside a king who valued her worth, that choice rippled outward, touched other lives, offered hope to those who'd lost it. Maybe that's what power really is. Not the ability to destroy, but the courage to transform. Not dominance over others, but mastery of yourself. Not forcing the world to accept you, but refusing to let the world define your worth. Jessica learned that lesson in the grove, proved it in the arena, and lived it every day beside a mate who'd been willing to lose everything for her. And somewhere, in territories across the wolf lands, Other different ones heard her story and began to wonder. Maybe they weren't broken after all. Maybe they were just ahead of their time. Maybe they were exactly what the world needed, even if the world didn't know it yet. If this story lit something inside you, if you felt her fear and her triumph, if you understood what it means to be told you're worthless when you're actually extraordinary, then subscribe to Cindy's Wolfheart Stories. Because here, we tell tales that burn. Stories about wolves who don't fit and mates who choose love over power. Stories about finding strength in difference and building futures from the ashes of rejection. Stories about girls who were supposed to die and kings who lost control. Stories like Jessica's. And maybe, if you're brave enough, stories like yours too.